Monorepo. Why should you use it? Why shouldn't you? And why are we using it? See if I can answer some of these questions. Let's start with what a monorepo is. As your software offering starts to grow and evolve, you will inherently have more and more parts of your system in play. So a monorepo is just saying that everything will be in one repository, more or less. So the alternative would be your server infrastructure that has nothing to do with your client code. For example, these traditionally end up in different, or quite naturally end up in different repositories. Someone working on an iOS app will have nothing in common with someone working on an Android app, or someone working on the backend code can't really help out in iOS usually. That's having the software in different repositories, because you're working in different teams, if you will, or different silos. However, having everything in one repository means that you sort of need to figure out, oh, someone else had changes. You're sharing a space. And this has some drawbacks. But it also has some benefits. But let's start with going through some of the drawbacks of it. So one quite clear drawback is, like, if you have everything in the shared space, you'll have a lot of growth pains to get everything to work together, because you sort of want your iOS app will have nothing to do with the server except for the contracts that it uses to talk to the server. Okay, so drawbacks of a monorepo. So one of the drawbacks of a monorepo is, of course, that you're all using the same repository. So I will sort of have to work with Git when someone else is made a change in a part of the system that I'm not working in. And that means you sort of need to put more emphasis on knowing how to address rebasing or do Git merges, or you need a good branching strategy. Another thing is if you have security concerns that you need to address, you only want parts of the system to be accessed by anyone else, then it's harder to do that in a mono repository. If someone shouldn't have access to the iOS app for some reason, then in a mono repository, everyone will sort of, unless you put in some really advanced safeguards, you will have people have access to the different parts of the system. And that in turn means that you'll have one large mono repository, one large repository. So the size of this thing is going to grow faster than each individual part of the system. And then, of course, the size of the repository will grow faster because you have everything in one shared place. This means that you will put more demand on your tooling, you need your build processes, everything that needs to be in place to handle this code mass needs to also be able to handle this code mass at scale. So this means you'll put more time into configuring and setting up your monorepo to get everything to work together. Last but not least, having everything in one place also means that there's one place where things can go wrong. So if your central repository goes down, you can't really push to it or whatever is going on, then you're going to have the issue where you can't really get software out for everyone, instead of having issues with just a single team that uses a different system or whatever. Okay, so given that we have all these drawbacks with tooling, you need to put effort in to get this to work. Otherwise, you're going to have longer build times. You're going to have more merge issues. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to have everything in one single place? Well, for me, it comes down a lot to collaboration. Say you have the Android, iOS, and the backend in a repository. What you're actually getting by having them in a joint repository is that you can have a shared point of, like, a shared source of truth of what the contracts are. And you also know that at this specific point in time, when you test the software together, you know that this version of the iOS app works with the server. This version of the Android app works with the server. So you see, it's really easy to get like a fingerprint in time when all your software works together. And if you apply this to a build system that also does integration testing, where it actually tests the software if it can talk to the other parts of the system, then you really have a continuous platform that checks your software quality and verifies that you have working software at each step in time in the repository. This single fingerprint of like, we have everything checked in, we know that it works, it makes for a better build system, and it makes collaboration easier. If I break something for the iOS team by checking in a change in a contract, then we can immediately detect that, and we can handle that really, really fast and early, instead of us waiting to do manual testing or waiting to see that in a later date. We can sort of have systems check our software for us. Another thing that I really appreciate with the Monorepo is that it's really easy to maintain control of your dependencies. If you're using a certain version of a dependency, upgrading that version across the board of all your software is so much easier. And that when you have a mono repository, you just check all the configurations in one repository, and there you go. Everything's updated. We can then also have the integrated tests checked to see, after this upgrade, are we still working? Do we still have working software? This in turn gives us a really good platform to refactor the code and make code changes, because we have this continuous support of everyone has access to the system, everyone can test the latest version of the system together, and we have this build pipeline verifying that we continuously have working software. For me, this is like a really good benefit, because as more and more people commit codes to the repository, it's easy to sort of accidentally make a change of a type or introduce a new field or rename something that someone else is dependent on. And if you don't have any systems to come to handle that and like work with it, then that's going to be an issue, right? You're going to detect it way later than necessary, and then it'll be harder to solve that problem. But another thing that really benefits with having a mono repository is you have this shared space. You can discuss, where do we place our libraries? Where do we place our common contract definitions? How do we work with the software? You can have documentation regarding the entire system checked in with version handling of that specific point in time for the system. Having everything in the mono repository really helps making sure that everyone can be on the same page. It's not perhaps for everyone, because the tooling setup is there. You need to actually invest time in getting this to work with your build system. But you can have your practices documented. Everyone knows where to go look for things. If someone made a change that broke something, you can capture it early. And there's a thing in like cooking or like in kitchens where it's called mise en place, which is a French term of like everything has a home, everything has a place. And if you're working collaborative in a shared space, it needs to be organized. It needs to have like, I know where I go to look for UI components. I know where our style guidelines around UX are. I know where to put database access and how to do the database access queries so that all the correct access rules, etc., are enforced. This is really, really important when you're building software together as one or more teams. Okay, so coming back to our mono repository, if you look at the high-level physical layout of our system, there are different areas in the repository that you need to be aware of, and you need to know where things go. We have a folder structure that captures everything. So the services folder will have all the microservices in our system. The library folder will have, for example, our domain model that contains all the code around our domain that is not central to data access and can literally be run on both client side and server side. We also have our UI components, shared libraries, we have testing libraries, everything to help us outbuild the platform, but it's then shared across our microservices and clients. We have gateways, that's the interface between the web HTTP part of our system and the queue-based backend, where the gateways sort of make sure that people are logged in, they have the right credentials, and then the gateways in turn handle the communication with the internal backend to make sure that it follows the right rules and dependencies, etc. And then of course we have the tools folder that is meant to keep our tooling, which is more or less command line tools that helps us be productive in our own system. So having an overview of where things go, you can quite easily learn how to navigate our repository. There's a README file and an architecture file in the root of the repository that sure goes into more detail about how to work with this repository. And then there's also like documentation. How do you set up your developer environment? How do you troubleshoot if your development environment goes down? Everything to sort of remove the speed bumps as you start working with our system. So this is a brief overview of mono repositories and everything like good and bad about them. We use them primarily to have a continuous delivery pipeline set up and a way for us to collaborate and have a good discussion of what kind of code we're sharing and where it goes if you're sharing it. Having these structures in place hopefully reduces the amount of decisions that you need to take while you're working with software, and also reduces the time you're looking for solutions that someone else has done. Hopefully you won't reinvent the wheel and instead go looking in the different libraries to see if you can find a solution that someone already done it. The problem is most likely already solved if you just look in the software or talk to the developers on your team. I hope this content was useful. If you like it, click the like button, share it if you feel that it's shareable, and subscribe if you want to hear more. That's all for me. Thank you very much.